I was wrong about something. Thank goodness we don't have to spend more than a page on this ball. Also, we get some answers. They still don't make much sense, but we get a couple of answers in the following few chapters. Hey guys, welcome back to the next part of the read-along for A Court of Thorns and Roses by Maas. We'll make it through chapter 31 to 33 this time. Like I said in the intro, the ball happens and it's over within a page. Feyre tries to evade all of the rich bachelors that are coming for her, much like Nesta. The only one who really seems to be enjoying herself is Elaine. But it only lasts for a page, and then we move on to the next afternoon when everybody is back up and eating lunch, breakfast or whatever. And there's news. Feyre's dad wants to buy the Beller estate. In case you don't remember this name, that's the girl that Feyre pretended to be when Rysand asked her name. Well, it burned down. Their whole estate burned down. The family is dead, the girl is gone, and Feyre actually feels guilty for a second. But don't worry, she is more concerned with what's happening in Prythian and what it might mean for Tamlin. That faeries came over the wall and apparently did this to the poor family. Now, I'm not sure why the idea that any faerie comes through or over the wall actually surprises Feyre, because clearly Andros made it through the wall somewhere. Tamlin had no issue coming for her, so going through the wall can't be that impossible. Feyre tells her family that they need to hire guards and just run at the first sign of something strange or danger, which seems to be the most sensible thing she's done so far, to be honest. She also tells Nesta more about the Blight and how it makes the faeries' magic either weak or go wild, which doesn't make an awful lot of sense, but then I guess in the next chapter you get a couple of explanations and then this makes sense, and it's just that Feyre doesn't know enough context. Mind you, there are other flaws in logic coming up, so we'll get there. Feyre informs Nesta that Tamlin and the Spring Court in general have so far kept the deadly courts in check. You know, all of the courts who want to go out and fight humans again. Which doesn't make an awful lot of sense to me. If all other courts were keen on war with the human world, then there's nothing Tamlin and Lucian could have done to stop them. It's one little court with apparently not all that many members, and only 2 high fae that we have seen. They couldn't risk a fight against Rysand by himself, but they're supposed to stop all of the other courts? That's just not happening. Feyre and Nesta also have like a brief chat that very much sounds like Feyre affirming Nesta's girl power, and she can do whatever she wants, and she can go out on her own and make a life for herself wherever she chooses to, and this sudden random girl power moment neither fits the mood of this chapter, and it still doesn't fit with what we've seen of Nesta's character up until like the last chapter, where she's suddenly strong-willed and caring instead of just a bitch. Feyre packs her bags and sets out to go back to Prythian to help Tamlin any way she can, which is virtually not at all, but we'll see. I'm sure since she's such a Mary Sue, she will miraculously fix everything anyway, despite the fact that she is hopelessly outnumbered and outskilled by every single faerie she will run into. Never mind that, she'll fix it somehow. So she takes 2 days to actually find a hole in the wall. But when she does, she takes her horse through and makes her way to the Spring Court, which I'm actually amazed at, because she wasn't awake for her whole journey there, nor was she awake for her journey back, and she can still find that place. Personally, I have no sense of orientation whatsoever, so I'm truly amazed at how she got there in the first place. I would have been forever lost in the woods. Feyre is also ready to shoot at absolutely everything that moves, despite the fact that a couple of sentences before this she tells us that she doesn't have any ash arrows. She had a single one that she used in Andros, and now she's just traveling with normal arrows, which will be completely useless against fairies. But she's armed. Isn't that helpful? She gets to Spring Court and it looks like it has been ransacked. Things are shattered, broken, there's blood everywhere, but no corpses. On to chapter 32. Feyre turns into a crime scene investigator and uses her tracking abilities from hunting on figuring out what went down here. She can't tell whether the dining room is trashed because Tamlin got mad in there beforehand or whether that was part of the attack. But since she doesn't find any corpses and she sees a couple of foot tracks, she concludes that Tamlin and Lucian were just sitting in the dining room and were then walked out or met people at the door and then took off together. But since there's blood and destruction everywhere else, I have to assume that Tamlin and Lucian were just sitting in the dining room waiting while their staff got attacked and tried to fight off people? Yeah, great. Thankfully for Feyre, Alice is still there and provides her with a massive info dump. Such as, how did Amarantha get there in the first place? How had she infiltrated all of the courts? Initially she came over as a courtier without any affiliation to any particular court, and she just felt out whether the other High Lords were still up for a fight against human beings, because Amarantha hates humans with a passion. She was already the best general in the King of Hypern's army and slaughtered humans and anybody who opposed slavery of human beings in the thousands, but apparently she was indifferent at that point. Alice doesn't really give you any details on that, but she only started hating human beings after her sister took a human lover and was then used for information and killed by this human soldier. How the hell did her sister, who according to Alice was just as good as Amarantha at slaughtering human beings and did so with abandon, how did this person fall in love with a human being? I'm already not a fan of the enemies to lovers trope in general, but if you're talking about like rivals or competitors, that's one thing where you can turn like bickering into affection eventually, or you can, veil your affection or attraction to somebody with bickering. But we're talking about two sides that are actively trying to kill each other here. With one side considering the other side lesser, whether that be because of species or their abilities. In this case it's species because it's high fae versus human. How is that the basis for romance of any kind? I just don't see it. Anyway, after that Amarantha was really pissed at human beings, but the war was over not too long after that. The treaty came into being, and now Amarantha had spent like 50 years infiltrating the courts, and then she poisoned everybody at some party and stole all of their magic. Apparently you can physically take someone's magic from them, and locked all of that away inside herself. Okay, well, I'll just accept this as it is now. I should give up on logic in this book, I suppose. Alice also tells her all the things that they couldn't say to her beforehand, because as part of a curse that Amarantha put on Tamlin, she wanted him for herself and he was like, ugh, no, thanks. So she cursed him. That's why they're all stuck with those masks for 7 by 7 years, and that's the time he had to find himself a human girl that hates fairies and is willing to kill one unprovoked to woo this girl and make her fall in love with him. But she also has to say that she loves him with all of her heart before this time is up. Now, they were all forbidden, or the curse itself kept everybody from telling Feyre anything about this. But since Alice can now tell her about it, and Amarantha showed up the second this time was up, the curse should be over and done with, right? At least the curse explains why people weren't overly mad about Andros getting killed. It's still not brilliant. I would still be pissed at you for killing a friend of mine, but I guess only Lucian really held that grudge for any amount of time. Well, in the first year of that curse, Tamlin also lost a lot of men because he kept sending them out to find himself that girl to break the curse. but a lot of his men were killed by either older women, is how the book puts it, and I don't know whether they mean, well, they were already old enough to be married and not interested or whatever, or whether the age limit was 20, I don't know. The curse is not that specific, but clearly a lot of the women that were capable of killing a faerie were too old for Tamlin's taste or something, I don't know. Anyway, he lost many men to this venture until he couldn't take it anymore and just ended this whole venture. Until a couple of months before the curse was up, and he was like, well, damn, maybe I should try this as a last resort again. So yeah, cool. So you want this person to fall in love with you and you leave it until the last minute because, cool, why not? That makes perfect sense. But that's why Andros never fought back when Feyre attacked him in the woods at the very beginning. He had actually volunteered to go over to find somebody for his High Lord to court and woo or whatever. Amarantha stole all of the High Lord's power beforehand. That's why nobody is opposing her. All of them are very limited in their magical abilities at this point because she stashed all of that away. She can't use all of it, but she's holding on to it. So she steals all of the magic and then she curses Tamlin on top of that. And somehow the curse is based on the condition that if he manages this, he gets his power back. Which then makes me wonder, why is she bound to this? We've already established that fairies can lie, so if she lied in this, then she could just sit there like, well, that was fun to watch for the last 49 years, but I'm not giving you anything. And I don't see what he could possibly do about it. I'm just a little bit unclear as to how this curse is supposed to work. Well, for one, it's over. The time frame has passed. So this should be done with. And I'm not sure what this actually means for Tamlin. Like, okay, he was screwed for these 49 years, but the masks are still on their faces. And what else happened at the end of this, beyond Amarantha showing up and capturing Tamlin? Because she didn't need the curse for that. She could have just rolled up with her soldiers and captured Tamlin like that. That had no bearing on anything. And I'm just confused. But, you know, it's not the first time nothing makes sense here, so why am I even questioning this? Alice tells Feyre that there's another part of the curse that is apparently still active because she can't tell Feyre about it, but she needs to listen properly to figure it out herself, and then maybe she can still do something about it. And once again, I don't understand why this curse in general is still active if the time is up. So there's still a chance for Feyre to break this curse, but what was the point of 7 by 7 years then, if you can just do it after anyway? Now Feyre is hell-bent on lifting the curse and doing what she can to help, so she insists that Alice take her to Amarantha's palace under the mountain. Alice resists at first, but eventually just gives in. It's like, yeah, fine, I'll, get you somewhere. And she takes Feyre to the cave that we saw at the summer solstice already. So now in chapter 33, Feyre can go on her way and try to reach Tamlin. But before we get to this cave, Feyre has to re-establish that she looked around the estate to find herself some weapons, and now she has her bow and arrows, none of them out of ashwood, so still useless, and 2 daggers. She decided not to take any of the other weapons because she doesn't know how to properly use them anyway. They will just weigh her down, which so far so good. That's actually a solid argument. If you don't know how to use a proper sword, then it's fairly useless in your hands. Then she also brought a day's worth of food. They start traveling, and she's like, oh damn, should I have brought more food? Well, how small is Prythian? Because she has seen this mural in the library where it's like, oh, this is the spring court, this is the day court, and this is the mountain in the middle of everything. Well, that would be more than a day's worth of travel away, wouldn't it? So yeah, you probably should have brought more food. But it's okay. Alice leads her to a shortcut, which is the cave we've seen before. So Alice sets off to find her nephews, and Feyre makes her way through this cave, which for some reason has a crack in the wall and is a shortcut to the palace under the mountain. And this crack in the wall leads straight into a hallway of the palace. Well, I guess fairies are not strong on architecture either, because if you see like a hallway in your palace and there's like a massive crack that somebody could squeeze through, that's not suspicious at all or anything. That's part of the charm of the hallway, I guess. As a side note, now that Feyre has gone places, there was no mention of her horse. She traveled to the estate on her horse, and I don't know whether she bound that poor thing to a pole somewhere and then just left it, or whether it's roaming the estate freely. Either way, it's in fairyland and therefore not particularly safe for this horse. Some characters should actually care for animals in this, but they don't. Did Amarantha take all of the horses that Tamlin had before as well, or did they leave those trapped in the stables? I don't know. I hope somebody took them, because they sure don't deserve this. Feyre sneaks around this hallway for a few minutes, contemplating whether she's doing the right thing, because oh my god, she needs to save Tamlin, but oh, she's so in over her head here. It's like, wow, she only just realizes this now, standing in this hallway, but okay. And then the Atoll captures her. She made it into the hallway, so you know, at least Amarantha didn't have to go looking for her. And in case you were wondering, she doesn't waste a single thought on Claire Better in this whole chapter. She got this girl's family killed and the girl is either dead or captured, but Feyre is now preoccupied with saving Tamlin, because that's all that really matters. Well, you could argue that at least Nesta is consistent with the person we met 2-3 chapters ago, if not with the person she was in the beginning, because those are two completely different people, but whatever. And Feyre does this weird flip-flopping from like, oh, I can read all of those tracks and I can investigate this crime scene, which is generally what you'd expect from a smart character. And then she hits you with like, oh, I only brought food for a day, but oh, it would take weeks to get to the middle of the country, wouldn't it? And like her whole thing of running into the palace under the mountain, and it's like, Alice at some point asked her like, what's the plan? And she's like, I don't have one. It's like, yeah, of course you don't. That's why you didn't even bring any ashwood. Like, I don't know how hard ashwood is to find in this land in general. But I would assume that either Nesta, who remembered where Feyre had actually gone, would maybe try to get some ashwood, because I think she knows as much as Feyre knew before she went away to Perfian. So she should know that ashwood is effective against fairies. So I don't quite see why Nesta wouldn't have built up a stash of ashwood weapons at home. I know I would have, but you know. And then Tamlin's estate doesn't have a single bit of ashwood either. Does this mean if a high fae uses a sword, like, or any of the daggers that they have lying around, if those are not made from ashwood and steel is not helpful against fairies, then how do they fight each other? Is it just a question of magical attacks, or is there more in regards to weapons that we don't know anything about yet? I don't know. You would think that if Tamlin has to fight other fairies at some point, that they would have weapons that have ashwood built in somehow as well. I don't know. The world building is full of holes, and the logic for the curse just doesn't track for me at all. But we know now that Amarantha is just pure evil. She's so horny for Tamlin, she just had to curse his whole household for close to 50 years, and yeah, okay. Sure, why not? Anyway, there should only be around 10 chapters left, so... and it should be more interesting now. Not more logical, obviously, but at least more interesting with things happening. So yeah, I'm almost looking forward to that, or maybe I'm just looking forward to the end. Because I could have told you this many chapters ago actually, but there's no way I'm reading another Sarah J. Maas book after this. Thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know what you make of Feyre's adventure and how wildly some personalities change in this book. Like and subscribe if you want to help the channel out, and I'll be back next week with another video. Bye guys!